Hello,
Okay.
everyone. It's good to see a lot of colleagues from the region, and thanks for taking part in our next webinar. I'm Afghan Nifty, Executive Director of the Caspian Policy Center. It's my pleasure to have esteemed think tank colleagues from the region. They are great experts on the critical issues of the Caspian region. I just want to say that Caspian Policy Center is presenting this platform to bring together the think tanks from the region and from the United States. And we want to actually make it a kind of a tradition in coming months as the opportunities from the virtual platform that we want to utilize here. With the rapidly changing global geopolitical landscape, coupled with COVID-19 induced economic and social disruptions of historical scale, it becomes increasingly challenging to balance relations with multiple foreign partners that oftentimes have diverging regional agendas. The Caspian Policy Center is bringing together foreign policy specialists from the leading research think tanks in the region and the United States to discuss the current economic, security, political situation in the region. Specific topics will include today the presence and the perception of regional and global powers and prospects for the increased US engagement in the region. Once again, I would like to welcome our audience in the US and in the region. And we have a very good moderator today who has a huge experience in the Central Asia and also for the Caucasus as well. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Ambassador Richard Hoagland, who is also our board member. I don't think that he needs a lot of extensive introduction. Many of you already know him. And Ambassador Hoagland, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Afghan. And good morning to all who have joined us today. Good morning, at least in Washington. I know it's evening elsewhere. What I would like to do is very briefly introduce our participants today, and they will be speaking in the order that I introduce them. Our first participant is Ambassador Farid Shafiev, who is chairman of the Center of Analysis of International Relations in Azerbaijan. He will be followed by Ambassador Georgi Badritsty, who is the Senior Fellow of the Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies. And then Iskander Akilbayev, who is the Executive Director of Kazakhstan's Council on International Relations. Next would be Eldar Tulyakov, Executive Director, Development Strategy Center in Uzbekistan. And then Brian Todd, who is Assistant Professor of Central Asian Studies, Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University of Washington here, of the United States here in Washington. Next would be Victor Kipiani, who is the chair of Geocase in Georgia. And certainly not least, but last will be Esmira Jafarova, who is Deputy Chairman of the Center of Analysis of International Relations in Azerbaijan. The focus of our discussion today is going to be on the perception of the United States in the Caspian region. And discussion will also include perceptions of the other major players in the region. I will be at the initial stages here watching how much time we're taking. I would ask each speaker to keep their comments to 5 minutes. And if it goes a bit over that, I'm going to have to intervene and ask you to follow up a bit later. We will take audience questions after the initial introductions by the speakers. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Ambassador Farid Shafiev from Azerbaijan.
Well, thank you, Ambassador. I would like to welcome all participants. Because of the time constraint, I will be trying to be brief and to just go through the questions which was posed to facilitate our discussion. Yes, indeed, the major role of United States in the region is the topic of today's discussion. The question how much United States is involved, what's the trajectory of the involvement and the recent history. Traditionally, the South Caucasus was the region of interest of several powers, but first of all, Russia, which basically possessed the region for 200 years almost. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, some other players, traditionally it was the Russia and then Iran and Turkey. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we've seen the active role of the United States and European Union to a certain extent. And recently we've seen the activities from China. The United States, the Washington administration, since 91, 92, they've pursued several major goals in the region. First of all, it's the strengthening independence of the newly independent countries in the South Caucasus. And here we can kind of divide into hard security issues like the independence, political independence, and soft issues like humanitarian projects, the human rights, and others. Besides that, the United States also pursued the development of energy projects. First of all, we're speaking about energy projects from the Caspian Sea, Azerbaijan, and Georgia, Turkey. That's the major, now the gas and oil pipelines route. But also the interest of Washington administration was the global war on terror and the, let's say, geopolitical interest. With regard to Iran, with regard to the operation in Afghanistan, and some other related issues. Unfortunately, if we'll go to the second question, how the United States currently seen in the region, I believe it's just global trend that the role of United States is diminishing in the region. It's partly due to internal domestic discussion within Washington about how much United States should be involved in different matters, even like, let's say, priorities to the Middle East. Current administration speaks increasingly about diminishing or, let's say, withdrawing the United States from this Middle East and other regions. And probably that trend will be present, will be seen in the South Caucasus too. The last, and it's not only about Trump administration, we've seen diminishing role of United States for, I would say, since 2009, 2010. So it goes back to Obama administration, I think, from my point of view. It's probably taking into account the global trend, what's going on in the United States, it will be unrealistic to see or let's say to expect that the United States can be present, actively present in all regions. You know, my experts speaking about overstretched capabilities, military capabilities, economic capabilities. So probably the United States should focus on certain countries across the globe. And I would divide them in two categories: the key partners like NATO countries and some other key partners across the globe like South Korea and some. But also there are a number of countries and where I would like to put in second category Azerbaijan, which they would like to keep what's called, some countries call it balanced foreign policy. Across the Caspian Sea, we have countries which for example, Kazakhstan, which call that kind of policy multi-vector policy. But the countries would like to play, to have a good relationship with the United States, but still would like to have the more geopolitical options in terms of the neighborhood. I would call them the bridging countries with the bridging capabilities. I think this is the I would say avenue where we can pursue our bilateral relations. And going to other blocks and organization which can be formed in the South Caucasus, in the Caspian, I would say that the countries has different priorities. We have countries which would like to join military alliances and already joined, like Armenia joined the CSTO, and our strategic partner, Azerbaijan strategic partner, Georgia aspires for NATO. We have, but Azerbaijan pursue non-alignment. I mean, we now chairing non-alignment movement. There are several organizations. We can name Turkey Council, we can name Caspian Economic Forum, we can name Guam, Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, Azerbaijan. But I don't think it's realistic to have something common umbrella organization for Caspian or for the South Caucasus. And definitely, if we will go to maybe the most the urgent or the most important questions, the fourth question about what someone can ask from the United States. I mean, from our national perspective, probably it's the resolution of the territorial conflicts. There are two countries with the occupied territories, Georgia and Azerbaijan. I would say that the most I wouldn't say the most, perhaps my Georgian colleagues would prioritize their conflicts too, but the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict is indeed, and as we've seen the recent clashes in Tavus region in the north of northwest of Azerbaijan, it shows that the unfrozen conflict jeopardizes not only peace and security, but also vital energy projects. I don't want to speak more about energy because my colleague Esmir Jafarova, she is specialized in energy projects, she will speak. But the Tavus region was very close to Baku-Tbilisi Ceyhan pipeline, Baku-Tbilisi Erzurum gas pipeline, and also railroad, which we have recently built. So I think, and again, this is quite unfortunate to note that the United States doesn't play active role in the resolution of Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. Perhaps I will limit my intervention because of the time constraint, but would be happy to elaborate more during the question and answer period. Thank you very much. Yeah, I finished.
Right. Okay, if I may, then I will proceed.
Absolutely. Ambassador Badristi.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I will start by noting that my diplomatic career, this beginning of my diplomatic career, coincided with the great changes that occurred in the world. The Cold War had just ended. The Soviet bloc had disintegrated and the Soviet Union itself collapsed. So just as I graduated and joined the newly created diplomatic service of Georgia, the world was promising so much to our part of the world. This was the time of idealism. However, very soon we discovered that the end of the old world order, based on bipolar arrangement, was not really followed by the creation of a stable and fair new world order. We still called it the post-Cold War era, which has, by the way, by now has ended itself without even developing a proper name for itself. We still call it post-something period. And there is a reason why. But to go back to what we had in the 90s, and since we are talking about the American engagement in this part of the world, well, despite the fact that South Caucasus especially failed to benefit from all the great new opportunities presented by the end of the Cold War, because while the Central and Eastern European countries just rejoined Europe, rebuilt their democracies, and enjoyed everything that the united Europe, newly created European Union had to offer, as well as getting a NATO security umbrella in time. Well, these all passed us because of various reasons, including internal, but there was one very clear sign that America, in a few years' time, managed to develop a strategy. And the strategy had a real vision, I would say, had two main goals. One was to secure the interests of the collective West, including the energy security, and the other was to facilitate the independence and sovereignty of the newly independent states, and engaging them in international projects that would give them an international geopolitical and more importantly geoeconomic function was the way to do that. This was the vision. And without that vision, without the American leadership, the projects that actually put Georgia and Azerbaijan on the geopolitical map of the world would not have happened. I was part of the process. I was part of the Georgian negotiating team for years. I was present personally when in Istanbul in 1999, a number of countries with the American presence, with President Clinton there, signed the agreement on Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan. There was clear leadership. Without that leadership, that project would not have happened. I'm saying it with kind of quite clearly. All right. That leadership today is not just lacking. It has been dropped, and this is not just the case for our part of the world. Probably we can now state that United States is in the process of resigning from the position of global leadership. And I hear more and more often voices from the United States that, okay, Caspian region, Azerbaijan are not that important anymore. The age of oil is drawing to a close, etc. So we can forget about this part of the world. I think this is not quite fair description of what is happening. Obviously, the role of oil has changed and will further diminish in the future. But the role of South Caucasus and the bridge that Georgia and Azerbaijan represent in conjunction maintains and can have even greater strategic value in the future. In 2014, I was in Astana, Kazakhstan, at the invitation of the Economic Development Institute under the president of the Republic. And this was another moment of great change. This was just after Russia invaded Ukraine, etc. And this was the moment when I was there, when President Nazarbayev said that this is a new era. Not all former Soviet countries will preserve their independence if they just sit on their hands.
Ambassador, excuse me, we're really at the time limit. We'll certainly come back to you, but if you can wind up in the next minute, we'd much appreciate it.
That is my goal. So as many people observe how Central Asian countries have been more or less passive and had surrendered a degree of sovereignty, large degree of sovereignty to Russia for all these years, they may have not noticed that there is initiative and readiness on part of these countries, particularly Kazakhstan, to engage in the strategic transportation projects that will increase their, first of all, realize their own economic potential to a greater degree, and will feel their sovereignty with greater sense. So what I'm saying is that we need new leadership that will see that South Caucasus, in conjunction with the Central Asia, has unrealized, unutilized geoeconomic potential that would benefit all the partners involved.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. We're going to move on directly to Mr. Akilbayev from Kazakhstan. To you, sir. Would you please unmute?
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be among distinguished guests. Well, Ambassador Badruzzi actually mentioned about the change that he experienced at the beginning of his career. I believe that now we're passing through another cycle of change. That 2020 has started as an ideal storm with the COVID-19 and this kind of global pandemic and uncertainty, the fall of oil prices, the killing of the General Soleimani from Iran. It all actually started a new kind of way of uncertainty in the Caspian region, in Central Asia and South Caucasus. So speaking specifically on the Caspian Sea, I believe for the last 5 years, it has kind of gained a new dimension. specifically starting from the sea, the crisis in the Middle East, where the Caspian Sea was used as a kind of military platform where the missiles by the Russia were sent to the Syrian territory. So another one was signing of the new Caspian Convention by dividing the specific zones and ratifying this, the legislative aspect of that. And all that provided a new momentum for the Caspian region. Speaking about the US presence, it was rightly mentioned that there is a general assumption that US presence in the world, not just in the Caspian Sea or Caspian region, is diminishing. And you see that not only US, but other countries are gaining new kind of momentum, like specific like China, where the greatest rivalry is emerging on the scene. So at this stage where in the process of transit of power, so-called, where the emerging powers are challenging the status quo, which has been established after the collapse of Soviet Union. Specifically talking about the Central Asian region, I believe that we need to look at the kind of new trends and new dimension, how the region is developing, because we have a new trends which we need to pay attention, specifically the growing young generation, the change of values and the perception. With the COVID-19, I believe that no country in the region or in general in the world were ready for that. And we were really challenging as a region to deal with the pandemic on the government and the social levels. The society has, for the first time, actually got this opportunity to talk about the COVID-19 and how it's going to affect the region. And this year, the US has announced its regional strategy on Central Asia, specifically outlining the 6 points where traditionally Afghanistan is taking much more bigger role, and Central Asian states I also mentioned. But now, if you look at the one phrase that was mentioned by Secretary Pompeo, is that we are not only paying attention to Afghanistan, but also we are focusing more and more on Central Asian as a region in general sense, mentioning 5 countries. And one point that is very important to emphasize is that he stressed that in this strategy, it's being stressed that we are promoting sovereignty, connectivity, and security just to protect the rights of Central Asian states vis-a-vis neighboring states. I believe that it's quite possible to assume that he mentioned China and Russia. So the China-Russia axis or partnership in this regard is playing more and more important role when US is dealing with Central Asia. And I believe in this respect, we will see greater pressure on the region from different stakeholders, from US, China, and Russia, on different matters, whether it's going to be trade, whether it's going to be technology, whether it's going to be military cooperation. And medium and small sized countries in our region, on some cases will be put under this kind of decision whether they're going to choose us or not. And Secretary Pompeo has clearly mentioned that it's better to trade with US rather than with China, for example, because we have better standards, etc. So if you look at what's happening around the world, with different tech companies and the sanctions which are being put by the US government, it's clear that even Europe, even the closest allies of US are being under the stress at this stage, specifically Germany on the energy side. And I believe that in 10 years, we're going to experience much bigger pressure and much bigger kind of transit of power in this region. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge the fact that Central Asia as a region is not very much important to US. If you look at the global perspective, we are still a transit road, and we are in political transit at the same time in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and other countries. We schedule to have a parliamentary elections next year in Kazakhstan. In Kyrgyzstan, this year they should have very important parliamentary elections. At the same time in Tajikistan, so the political situation is very important nowadays. And I believe during the COVID-19, during the time when we are still dealing with the new trends and new dynamic, we need the political transition is passing through. It's very kind of fragile, but at the same time promising moment. So I believe in this respect, it's very timely to discuss the regional trends and take into account a new dimension of regionalization. Thank you. Ambassador Hogan.
Okay, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. Next on our list is Mr. Tulyakov. Are you there, sir?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thanks for the organizers, Caspian Policy Center, for such a wonderful event. Yes, regarding the topic, Central Asia is located in the crossroads of great civilization and serves as a linking bridge between the East and the West. Thus, it has been in the center of interest for global and regional actors, mostly for their geopolitical and geostrategic ambitions. For the last 3 years, we have been witnessing the acquisition of both global and regional actors in the region. As an example, we can say that the US and EU have reviewed their strategy for Central Asia. Russia and China have been also striving to strengthen their institutional mechanism and influences through Euro-Asian Economic Union and BRI, respectively. We would say that Russia, of course, as it has already been mentioned, had a dominant position in the region for decades, until recently, though, where we also have other actors, such as China, as one of the main actors. In general, the facts show that the volume of total trade with main partners has been gradually increasing in Central Asia for the last few years. However, in the Chinese direction, the growth was considerable, because for the last 10 years, Chinese total trade turnover with Central Asian states almost doubled. It increased from 19 billion US dollars to more than 37 billion in 2018, whereas with Russia the increase is by only 25%, and the EU is just by 16%. The export volume also is increasing towards between China and Central Asian countries. However, due to the Soviet legacy, the region's infrastructure system and economic supply chains have been constructed with a link to Russia, which is still functioning at certain levels. Moreover, we also have the issue with migrants in the rush of migrants from Central Asia in Russia, which who also contribute much to their country's GDP. Also, we should note the significant influence of Russia in Central Asia through soft power, because Russian mass media, as well as films, TV series, and theatrical performances are popular in the region. Therefore, today Central Asia has close ties with Russia, which is one of the main trade partners and investor in the region. As for China, due to major changes in the national development of China and Chinese foreign policy strategy, especially after the launch of the Belt and Road Initiative, we believe its priorities and presence in Central Asia have changed significantly. The region has become a strategic crossroads for China's global economic and trade relations. For Central Asia, BRI projects look highly promising, allowing regional countries to increase their connectivity, expand regional trade, and modernize their obsolete transport infrastructure. From China's perspective, the BRI is the way to deliver public goods, promote global connectivity, and portray itself as a responsible stakeholder. In this context, Uzbekistan is rather an advantageous partner, with its great potential for industrial and technological development, as well as the young labor force, and plus Uzbekistan enjoys centuries-old relations with China, dating back to the history of the famous Silk Road. Tashkent views China's BRI as a win-win cooperation rather than a platform that can gradually aggravate competition with other major powers. At the same time, under the COVID-19 impact on national economies throughout Eurasia and beyond, China may adopt its BRI strategy to meet new needs in a post-COVID-19 world to build economies, support local manufacturing and industrial development, especially in healthcare system, which is under testing currently, the green economy and other sectors. As for the European Union, we can also see that the new strategy does not present the EU as a partner or a competitor in the Central Asia against any global or regional power. The document stays away from the competition with Russia or China, although we should mention that the EU is seen as Central Asia's biggest economic partner. 30% of the region's total trade is with the Union, but the EU trade is concentrated overwhelmingly in Kazakhstan, whereas the region represents less than 1% of the EU's total foreign strategy. Then we should mention that the United States has also...
Sir, we're going to move along soon, so if you could summarize quickly, please.
Thank you. Regarding the last question that was asking what we would ask as one of the main things, I should say that security has always been a priority for the region since we have managed to maintain it at some level together with our foreign partners. Currently, the investment would be in high demand. We believe by investment, of course, we mean financial resources, international best practices in developing the economy, education, health sector, etc. Know-how, high-profile professionals in a variety of spheres. Well, this is very brief, so hopefully we will be contributing during discussion. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you very much, sir. That was very, very interesting. We are going to move right along to my colleague here in Washington, Professor Brian Todd, who is one of the real experts on this region. So I turn the floor to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ambassador Hoagland, and thank you, Mr. Nifty and the Caspian Policy Center for the opportunity to talk today and to be a part of this very distinguished panel. First of all, I'll just say that all of the things that I'm about to say are my own personal views and not the views of the US government, the Department of Defense, the National Defense University, or the NISA Center. To start with, I have to agree with my colleague on the panel, the ambassador from Azerbaijan, Ambassador Shafiev, in the sense that it is unrealistic to expect that the US will be engaged in all regions of the world. I like the way that he delineated, different areas of interest for the US and different partners. And I would have to say that for Central Asia and the Caspian region, I'm very happy to see that we have a strategy. The fact that there is a document that says this is what we want to do with these countries, with the region. It might be aspirational in a lot of ways, but I think it's good that at least there is that foundation. That being said, there's been so much written about this strategy. Some people are calling it unprecedented, the first of its kind. I don't think it is. In that sense, I think that, prior administrations have also had a strategy for Central Asia. So I don't think it's unprecedented. On the other hand, I don't think it's as terrible as others have made it out to be. I don't think it's necessarily unrealistic or, something that's incomplete or yet to be unrealized. I think that there's a lot of potential there. And I think what it really comes down to is, how are we going to do the things that we say we want in this strategy? And so when you look at what the basis is for the strategy, for aspirations for the region, yeah, it is things like independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and just the fact that the United States is in the region, working with our partners, I think is a very good sign. I do love the phrase great power competition, although I don't know that it's applicable to Central Asia. And I say that because I don't see the US as actively trying to compete with China or Russia in the region. I think there are areas of the world where we do, but I think in Central Asia, the United States has very concrete objectives, and we are working with our partners in the region on those objectives. So how are we going about this? Well, we've had a number of high-level bilateral visits over the last couple of years. In October 2018, you saw National Security Advisor John Bolton visit Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, which I think was a really great symbol of, importance of our relationship with those countries. More recently in Central Asia, we've seen visits from Secretary Pompeo to Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, as well as Undersecretary Hale. I think that the fact that he's going to these countries and meeting with our partners there illustrates how much we want continuing and lasting relationships with countries like Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. Now, I know that the argument could be made, why aren't these officials visiting all the countries in the region? And I think that gets to the next part of the strategy, which is we have to be realistic. I think increasingly so in this COVID era, where we are now in a period of reduced resources and capabilities, in the sense of the US is going to have to make some hard decisions about where and how we partner. And this isn't even specific to Central Asia. I think we're going to see this internationally. And so when we look at the region, and this is Central Asia, this is the Caucasus, you're going to see the United States working with the countries that want to work with the United States. I have to say personally that, the United States gets a lot of criticism for not doing more in and with the region. But over the last 10 years, I've seen a lot of really good initiatives put forth by the United States and soundly rejected by countries in the region. So it isn't always a lack of interest by the United States. So I get very frustrated sometimes when I see, the United States' interest is waning or we're withdrawing from the region. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that in any relationship, you need partners that have mutual objectives. And if not all the partners are, willing and able to work together, then it's not going to work. So I think as a result, you're going to start to see the United States really focusing its efforts. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think what it does do, and this goes to the question that was posed of, what would be the one ask of the United States? As someone who's not from the region, my advice would be to follow the words of the great philosophers Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, which is, it's not always about what you want, but sometimes it's about what you need. And I think that the countries in the region have to be very strategic about what it is that they need from their relationships with the United States and other partners working in the region. I'm going to end on that note because I don't want to run over time, but I really look forward to the discussion.
All right, thank you so very much, Professor. Especially loved your closing comment there, and I saw a lot of smiles around from the others too. Thank you for that. We're going to turn now to Mr. Kipiani. To you, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. The multi-vector model is a nice connotation. Unfortunately, it cannot be applied to Georgia for several quite perfectly understandable reasons. A large chunk of the country remains under Russian occupation, which naturally prevents Tbilisi from adopting a truly multi-vector approach. That said, even if we speak about a policy of multi-vector -1, which is the occupying power, it still might be conceivable. Yet even if such policies pursue, Georgia's path would still differ greatly from the balancing acts pursued by Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. It's obvious that Tbilisi steadfastly pursues formal Euro-Atlantic integration with all possible emphasis and without any meaningful caveats. But all this does not, of course, deny the importance of stability and cooperation in the South Caucasus, within the wider Black Sea region and in relation to the Black Sea and Caspian macro region. Georgia's contribution to the cross-border cooperation and regional development are premised on the country's role as a pivot for various major international projects, which geopolitical and financial viability Tbilisi tries to ensure. A multi-vector policy should therefore not be seen as purely outbound in nature, which means Georgia versus major regional stakeholders, but must also include inbound elements that stem from the genuine interest of stakeholders in their own domestic stability and order. It also provides for the vital interests of regional actors such as Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan with respect to Georgian reforms and close integration with Western markets and institutions. This very high degree of interconnectedness and interdependence demonstrates all the realities of geopolitics and geoeconomics in the Black Sea and Caspian region, and indeed underlines the importance to make those ties even stronger and more resilient. Combined with the region's long history and the looming challenges of our post-pandemic world, Georgia must position herself as a key actor capable of providing reliable access to the wider world and to the West while bypassing political bumps and risks. A G-world in which each country selfishly stands up for its own interests and ignores others would not just be ill-suited to our region, but would also completely and irreversibly shatter the idea of furthering our interests in union or alliances with others. Georgia's progress is equally important for the United States and the European Union. It is no accident or coincidence that both Washington and Brussels variously praised Tbilisi as a valuable and key partner in the region. These objectives clearly underline Georgia's foreign policy choices and come as no surprise considering the pace and ambition of the country's agenda for rapprochement with the European Union. In terms of Georgia's relationships with Europe, it is encouraging to observe how the country is building new political, economic, and cultural ties with its European homeland. How new EU and Eastern Partnership initiatives are tangibly bringing more Europe to the region. As for US-Georgia ties, the two countries' strategic partnership charter is truly a unique constitutional document that sets out many ways in which Washington and Tbilisi can cooperate politically, economically, culturally, and militarily. Beyond this, the standalone bipartisan Georgian Support Act reinforces and expands America's unwavering support for Tbilisi and determination to oppose Russian occupation. In many respects, this act reminds me of the Wallace Declaration with respect to the Baltic states under the occupation. It also, we should also keep in mind, the National Defense Authorization Act, which defines various meaningful forms of US-Georgia cooperation, as well as the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And the 2016 memorandum, Deepening Defense and Security Partnership, becomes a framework agreement that was renewed in 2019. The House and Senate have in addition introduced dozens of resolutions and bills in support of Georgia, and preliminary discussions to open negotiations over a free trade agreement between two countries are underway. I should emphasize that the United States are, of course, not a Black Sea or Caspian country, but are to some extent already a Black Sea power. All the efforts and steps I've described go well beyond a purely bilateral format, and their ultimate goals are to promote the region's stability and prosperity, responding to the needs of the region's various members, and meeting the expectations of the relevant stakeholders. If there ever was a cause and purpose that we had to share together, this is it. Thank you, Ambassador, and I would of course be delighted to answer any questions the audience may have. Thank you.
To you for that fine presentation. For these initial presentations, we're going to finally move to Deputy Chairman Jafarova. We look forward to what you have to say, ma'am.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for their statements. I will be talking about energy as I was requested to do so. So as we know, since the inception of independence, Azerbaijan has managed to build reliable partnerships around the world, including with the United States. And its pragmatic and balanced foreign policy, which is also very well aligned with its national, including economic interests, enabled to build equally strong, well-thought relations with all. And we all have witnessed throughout the passing decades that together with some large multinational corporations, that are international partners, Azerbaijan established a successful model of energy cooperation through the construction of Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan, Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum oil and gas pipelines. And we are all witnessing that the Southern Gas Corridor, which has been largely supported, strongly supported by the United States, is coming to its conclusion. And this corridor, which I will basically talk about, the Southern Gas Corridor, which is the important topic of the day, it stands as a valuable contribution to Europe's energy security and ensures diversification of sources and routes of energy. And definitely, Azerbaijan's energy strategy during this last 25 years, including through the Southern Gas Corridor, aimed at contributing to stability and cooperation throughout the neighborhood and in Europe. And as a result of the proceeds that we have received from all these projects, all areas of Azerbaijan's statehoods have flourished. Our trajectory of becoming an energy state is very natural, since Azerbaijan has become the motherland of the first industrially drilled oil well in the world in 1846. It happened in Baku, actually, not in Pennsylvania. Azerbaijan, which has made its name largely as an oil country, it's been working intensively to also extract its and transport its gas resources to Europe. The Southern Gas Corridor, which I mentioned before, therefore has become an important chain of energy security, economic development, and global partnership. And this corridor, this project, is actually contributing to the creation of European gas market that envisages competitiveness and diversification of sources and routes, which is very important for Europe's energy security. And the significance of this project is also enhanced by the fact that it unites all components of security. It also involves close cooperation of 7 countries. The project has enjoyed support of major financial institutions like EBRD, a European Investment Bank, Asian Development Bank. But the strategic importance of this corridor is not only confined to Azerbaijan and its countries that are involved in the implementation of this project. It has potential to expand to Balkans, to Central and Western Europe as well, to attract new supplier, transit, and consumer countries. So we all know that the works on the 4 segments of the project are successfully implemented. Turkey is already receiving volumes of gas since the formal inauguration of the SGC, and the SGC is scheduled to be fully operational this fall. We have witnessed at the end of May that the first gas has already been pumped into the Albanian section of TAP, and just very recently the last well in the TAP pipeline was completed, which means that 848-kilometer pipeline is now joined with TANAP through to the pipeline receiving terminal in Italy. This is another milestone in the completion of SGC. Definitely, in concluding, as I said before, the corridor stands as one of the guarantors of Europe's energy security and has enjoyed immense support by the United States as our partner, who has supported Azerbaijan throughout the implementation of all the energy projects from the beginning, since the signing of the contract of century and the initiation of the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. There were a lot of imponderables around the way at that time, but the United States support was really, really instrumental in implementation and realization of all those projects. And Southern Gas Corridor is no exception in this regard. And definitely with this project, Azerbaijan will contribute to the decarbonization efforts of Europe, and diversification and decarbonization align well with Europe's energy policy and are essential elements of its energy security. And the support of our partners, as I said, the United States has been instrumental. And as you said, what will be the last thing to ask from the United States? The one thing that you would like to ask from the United States in this regard, I think the one thing that I would ask from the United States in this regard would be to continue supporting Azerbaijan and its project that has been Azerbaijan has been receiving from the very beginning, because it has been really important element in becoming of all these projects. So that would be something that I would ask the United States to keep an eye on, because that is contributing to not only to Azerbaijan's energy security, but also to the greater European continent. So I will limit my comments to this because we are under time constraints. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that. And now we're going to move into the question and answer phase of this presentation. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and ask a first question here, but we do have other good questions coming in. The question I would like to pose, and I would like to have anyone who chooses to answer speak up. We have been talking predominantly about major powers, Russia, China, European Union, United States, but there are certainly other secondary but important powers in the region. Very specifically, I would say Turkey, but also Iran, working on both sides of the Caspian. So I would like to hear some of your comments about the roles of Turkey and Iran in the region also. Is there anyone who would like to pick that up? Please, go ahead, sir.
Probably, yes. As I said in my first intervention, Turkey and Iran traditionally were present in this region for centuries. So it's natural to expect they will continue to do so. They have different, I would say, security perception, but also historical perceptions about the aspiration, about the history of the region. For Iran, sometimes Iran considers certain part of Central Asia and the South Caucasus as their historical heritage. Turkey also due to certain linguistic the links, but I would say in terms of the territorial aspiration, it's almost none. Mostly it's about the cooperation, about the economic and political presence. So that's, I would say, the differences between these two. But also the, Professor Todd mentioned about the matching issue, when we're speaking about the cooperation with the United States and the countries in the region, and the same about Iran and Turkey. I would say there are countries which would like to have closer cooperation with Turkey, for example, and visits indeed when somebody, especially now, increasingly speaking about the Turkish aspirations. It's sometimes the matching desire to have more Turkish involvement in the region. I'm speaking about my country, especially. But in the same time, it's I would say the reality, the geopolitical reality. Countries in the region would like to stay away from the geopolitical clashes of the big powers. So this is mostly when we're speaking about the situation around Iran. So I would say I would limit about my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador. Is there anyone else that would like to pick this up?
If it's possible, I would like to make some brief comment.
Absolutely, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, speaking about, you mentioned about the secondary or medium-sized powers, which are also involved in the region. We has traditionally been talking about great power relations or great power struggle, but it's also important to talk about so-called small games, where the medium powers are playing much more important and much more ambitious role in the region. The relations between China, US, and Russia in Central Asia or in other parts of the world, they have certain disagreements, but they have tradition on agreeing and kind of going to compromise on the different issues. Small size or like medium powers like Turkey, Iran, or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan, they are gaining more momentum, like Turkey nowadays. Turkey has its own vision, 2023, and since they are gaining more power and becoming a regional stakeholders, they are becoming much more ambitious in the region, and they would like to challenge the status quo. As it happened before or in recent years, for example, like in Tajikistan, where one opposition leader traveled to Iran, and the president of Tajikistan traveled to Saudi Arabia to sign a deal. So it created some unease between Tajikistan and Iran, for example. And sometimes those regional powers, there is a kind of certainly a challenge where those powers, regional powers, can transform the disagreements to Central Asia on different partners. But I would like to mention one point is that, for example, Turkey and Japan has its own cooperation in Central Asia. I call it silent partnership because you don't hear much about Japan and Turkey partnering on different matters. But in fact, if you look at the real cases, Japan and Turkey, they have good partnership in the sphere of oil and gas, specifically in Galkanish field in Turkmenistan. Companies like Renaissance or Mitsubishi, they work on a different sphere. In Navoi as well, the special free zone in Uzbekistan, Turkey and Japan work as a consortium. Japan and Turkey, they built a bridge in the eastern of Kazakhstan. And so, and on the governmental level, and both leaders, Prime Minister Abe and President Erdogan, they have really good relations. And they share the risks and share the opportunities because Turkey has a good image and cultural bonds in Central Asia. Japan has its own technology and really good image here in the same time. So for those countries with a win-win situation, they can cooperate easily in this respect. So there's a danger, but at the same time, there is a great opportunity.
Okay, thank you so very much for bringing up Japan. There are others that play a role in the region too, South Korea, for example,
yes,
and others. And we will come back to that perhaps a bit later. Is there anyone else who would like to pick up this issue? Yes, sir, Ambassador.
Yeah, 30 seconds now, Ambassador. I very much realize that it takes two to tango. But what's happening in the region is really very unique because actually it's quite an interesting triangle which is emerging for over more than 2 decades, which is linked economically and which has some quite interesting arrangement in the security and defense. It's about triangle of Ankara, Baku, and Tbilisi. So that's something, you know, that's the long-lasting partnership which goes for more than 2 decades, which is very heavily premised on bringing hydrocarbons from the Caspian Sea to the Europe. But the recent developments, especially in terms of cooperating in the security field and in the field of defense, you know, that's something, you know, which should be raised as an interesting development in that respect and should be watched and monitored very closely. So that just to add to the full picture. Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to say that the cooperation between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey is a good example of how the alignment of a long-term national interest takes precedent over cultural, religious, linguistic, many other considerations. And this all has been possible even with the different political systems in all 3 countries. So I think this is a good case study for many observers who study political systems and international relations.
I also may add.
All right, thank you very much. Yes.
Yes, on energy.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Yeah, because the question was also about the role of Turkey. I just wanted to highlight. I mean, this is a common knowledge, but I wanted to highlight the role of Turkey in the implementation of all the projects, energy projects that are initiated in Azerbaijan goes through Georgia and Turkey. And as Ambassador also noted, this triangle is really a key triangle in the implementation of all these energy projects that are going through the region. And that is something that should be underlined. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any final comments on this before I move on to another question? All right, if not, there is one good question that has come in that we're going to start with here. And what I'm noting is that a number of the questions focus on specific issues or specific countries. But certainly those of you who are watching are free to hear, our participants are free to join in and comment too. The first question I'm going to ask is for Uzbekistan, Mr. Tolyakov. And that is that Uzbekistan has been going through some very major reforms in recent years. It's a process, it's still ongoing, but the question is specifically, has this affected your relationship with the United States? And I would add more broadly, has it affected your relationship with other powers in the region? Any reaction to this, sir?
Thank you very much for the question, Ambassador. Yes, within these last 2 years, we have been cooperating with many other partners in the region and beyond. The first President identified Central Asia as the main priority in foreign policy of Uzbekistan. As you can see, we have initiated several projects in Central Asia, and the good thing is that regional heads of states have supported Uzbekistan, and therefore Uzbekistan has become one of the main actors in the region in terms of regulating territorial disputes, in terms of regulating water resources issues, and many other issues, trade turnover. And the thing is that now they these countries.
Mr. Tulyakov, I think there's a problem with your mic.
Can you hear me now?
We have hearing you.
It's coming through very unclearly, intermittently.
Hello?
You know, sir, I think what we're going to have to do is give you time to take a look at your microphone to see if there's a problem, and we're going to move on. I promise we can come back to you, though, if that's okay with you. So sorry about these technical things. They happen when we're on international conversations like this. They're annoying, but they seem to be inevitable from time to time. Another question that has come in from the audience, and again, another very specific question. Right now, we still have the very unfortunate conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia that has broken out into armed conflict on the border. And the specific question is, thinking of other powers in the region, there is the Cooperative Security Treaty Organization, of which Armenia is a member, and which is basically a Russian organization that was created to solve militarily problems. The question is, do you see a role for the Cooperative Treaty Organization, the CSTO? Obviously, we don't have anyone from Armenia at this time, but this would become a question mainly for our participants in Azerbaijan. Do you have a reaction to this?
Yes, yes, indeed was hot discussion about the role of CSTO in the recent outbreak of the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I just would like to remind that this time the conflict was at the region at the international border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And actually for this reason, I mean, we have the reason to dismiss that these recent clashes was provoked by Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan is not interested and doesn't have the let's say, military theater in that region, because we realize that if we're going to attack Armenia, we're going to cross the international border, and that's the jurisdiction of CSTO. And perhaps the opposite side was interested more. In 2016, we had also clashes in April between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the occupied territories. CSTO at that time refused to be involved because the Nagorno-Karabakh and now occupied regions of Azerbaijan is the jurisdiction of Baku and not SSTO, and they clearly stated that. This time also, despite the call from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, the CSTO decided not to be drawn into the conflict. We have to take into account that several countries in this organization, as Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, has very friendly and strategic relationship with Azerbaijan. But also Russia is the member of the Minsk Group co-chairs, the OEC Minsk Group co-chairs, which is dealing with the negotiation. So the Moscow, at least formally, is trying to stay equidistant from the both sides. But I would say perhaps it was a test to see how much the Yerevan can expect the involvement from CSTO, and not much I will see from the development after the clashes. But having said that, still, I mean, there is we've seen on July 17 and also on July 23rd, the Russian-Armenian military exercises. So I think taking into account that was the limited military clashes. So no one was involved, I mean, third countries, but in the future, if it will be larger military clashes, so we don't know. But let's hope that optimistically that the other third parties won't be involved militarily on the one in our side, because it might lead to much greater clashes, geopolitical clashes in the region. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Mr. Tulyakov, I'm going to come back to you to see if your microphone has improved.
Hope you can hear me, Your Excellency.
Yes, it's much better now. Thank you so much. Continue, please.
Coming back to the question, although we have identified Central Asia as a priority in our foreign relations, and I should mention that Uzbekistan has been cooperating with many other countries beyond the region on, based on mutual interest, including already mentioned Caspian region, then Asia, including China, Japan, Korea, and then the European Union, of course, the United States. So I should mention that if Uzbekistan was rather, I would say, closed before 2017, now it has become very active in the region and in the international arena. Uzbekistan, of course, has taken courage to initiate several projects within Central Asia and in the international arena. Uzbekistan, of course, has been the initiator in regulating regional disputes with regard to territorial disputes that we have had for years. Then we have had problems in regulating water resources. So we have been initiating negotiations with our Central Asian neighbors. And the good thing is that heads of states of Central Asian countries have been supporting, and they have been cooperating very tightly in a variety of aspects because we have lots of common points to share in terms of language, culture, tradition. Therefore, I should say that currently the foreign policy of Uzbekistan is very diversified, open, and it's not limiting itself only with certain countries, but open for cooperation. As a result, we can see the state visits of President of Uzbekistan to different continents of the world, and the same thing is happening that we are hosting state visits from many other countries in Uzbekistan. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much for that. Here's another question that has come in. It's quite specific, but I'm going to pose it in a larger context. Right now, the year 2020 is playing out as one of the most historic, and primarily this is because of the global problem of COVID-19. The question that I would like to ask is, how do you foresee your country coming out of this most interesting period? Is it going to change the way your country looks at the world, and will it change your relations with other countries in the region? Is there anyone who would like to pick that up?
Yes,
yes, sir. Please,
Yeah,
Ambassador.
No, I'm just start with something. It's indeed a very difficult question to predict what the world will have there after COVID-19. But I think, despite all this gloomy, sometimes the forecast, I believe, yes, we're gonna have economic difficulties. And, you know, people speaking about 1918, 1933, you know, all this Great Depression. And, you know, we've seen that in recent financial crisis that the world recovered in 2 years. Perhaps the next 2 years will be difficult for all countries, but I think we will return to the normalcy. However, speaking about how countries, individual countries can change, definitely in terms of the healthcare reforms, in terms of the government management, probably the role of the government, centralized government, will be increased because the people will need more support from, from the budget. We see that in the European Union. So my prediction that the role of central government in dealing with the crisis will be increased, which might entail some other, related problems. People speaking about surveillance, global, national level, at global level. But again, I don't want to go into this sort of the apocalyptical the forecast. I believe we will handle, and individual countries too, this crisis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. In passing there, you raised another issue that is drawing a lot of attention, and that's the new digital connectivity that could lead to national surveillance in the streets and change the way that policing is done. Maybe this is not relevant to every country, but I wonder if anyone has a thought on this issue.
Well, again, maybe it's issue not only to centralized government. I mean, or let's say different. It's in the West also that we've seen the surveillance coming on the streets. So it's the global phenomenon. Thank you.
Ambassador, if I may, add from Georgia.
Absolutely. Go ahead, please, Victor.
My expectation when we speak about the crisis and when we speak about the pandemics, that would help Georgia in the first instance to increase its competitiveness, increase its modernity, if you will, of the institutional capacity. Because from what we have observed so far, in terms of the quality of providing those public services, in terms of healthcare, and probably that does not directly address your question about electronic surveillance, but all in all, my expectation, and of course, with recognition of the fact that the crisis could not be dealt just by Georgia, this is a global crisis, and all is relative. But if we could speak about an upside of the crisis, and the crisis management in the first place has shown that we're capable to upgrade our capabilities. And that's not just on the level of the political elites, but on the level of the civic grassroots. So this combined approach, gives us some glimpse of hope, if you will, that the post-pandemic world for Georgia would be more resilient, stronger, and more competitive than we have today.
Okay, thank you very much for adding that. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
I see two. So Eldar first, and then Iskander.
Yes. Regarding the questions, I should, yes, agree with my colleagues and add that COVID-19 has actually accelerated the reforms in many spheres, specifically in digitalization, in the health sector, in education, and many other spheres. I should mention that, like in Uzbekistan, the working conditions have changed substantially. So people had to adapt, and thus, because we have named this year as the year of digitalization, the COVID-19 actually helped to accelerate to reach those aims stated in the state program, by the fact that lots of spheres have started to digitalize. Then I should also mention that COVID-19 also influenced on, I would say, testing the relations between states. Because at the initial stage, when COVID-19 showed in China, many countries, including Central Asian countries, Uzbekistan, have been sending out products, all these resources to China so that they deal with it as soon as possible. Whereas afterwards, when COVID entered our region, China reciprocated and started sending the products. Experienced doctors even came to help us. So COVID-19 helped to test the relations between states, and I believe we have positive results because of that. Thanks.
Okay, very good. Mr. Akilbayev, you wanted to make a comment too. Please go ahead, sir.
I would like to hope that we will have a more optimistic results of how COVID-19 will influence our government. Certainly, it was a test for not only for the government system in general sense, but also for society. As it's widely mentioned, old habits die hard, and the daily routines, the way how people operate on a daily basis has changed certainly. And at the same time, as I agree with my Uzbek colleague that it accelerated the process to change and transform and upgrade the system to the digital level and to increase the quality of services, which is really important from the government side. The services which government provide to the people should be on much better level. The healthcare, education, the government e-golf, so-called the government services to the society is very much important. The demand from the society will increase certainly because it creates demand, and since people experience a vacuum of information because they didn't know what this pandemic is, will gradually transform into the demands, and the governments will need to address those demands, which is really important for the political and economic reforms of the country. At the same time, the COVID-19 became a kind of, if you look on the global scale, COVID-19, it provided opportunity, but at the same time, it became a new element of competition between US and China, because there's blaming and shaming element, and COVID-19 is being used as a tool to kind of compete on a different scale. So this kind of pandemic is a cyclical, and it usually appears in 5-6 years dimensional, SARS, MERS, Ebola, etc. So we should expect that in 5 years or 10 years, we will have something to deal with again. And we better to be ready to deal and address those challenges, whether it's climate, food security, water security, etc.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have a comment on this before I move on to our final round of questions? If not, then as always in such webinars, our time has gone by extremely quickly. We're coming toward the end, but there's still time for further comments. And what I would like to do, rather than a quick question, is ask each of our participants, is there something that has entered your mind as we have been talking, as you have been listening? Is there a point that you wanted to make earlier that you didn't have time? This is your opportunity to weigh in with your final comment. So I'll do this. You can volunteer or I'll begin to call on you. So who would like to go first? Dr. Todd, yes.
So I would say that following on the comments that I made earlier, when I was talking about reduced tension on the region, I think we're going to see more from C5+1, but increasingly also these trilateral groups that are now being set up by the State Department. The first one, of course, is the US, Uzbekistan, it's just the first is that we want to do with the partners in the region, what their interests are as well. Uzbekistan has been a fantastic partner over the last years. And support that, and as well encourage other countries in the region to do the same. So I think that that's what we're going to start to see more of when we
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else with their final comment that they would like to make, please? Yes, sir. I see a hand up.
Yeah, I agree with my colleague regarding. I agree with my colleague regarding the trilateral agreements. I should mention that Uzbekistan has been cooperating with the United States in terms of setting peace in Afghanistan, because Uzbekistan has set a priority that if there is a peace in our neighboring country, there is a peace in Uzbekistan and in the region. Therefore, we have been initiating peace talks and platforms to discuss the dispute settlement of peace, regulating peace in Afghanistan. And the good thing is the United States has been supportive with that regard. It's a priority for the United States. So therefore, there is a mutual interest in regulating this issue. And therefore, we hope that this process will accelerate, and we hope that there will be peace in Afghanistan for the benefit of Uzbekistan, for the benefit of the world. Thanks.
All right, very good. And
can I say just
yes,
a few words?
Absolutely.
Well, this should probably sound as a conclusion of what I've been attempting to say in my kind of main speech. And my main point is that the nations of Central Asia would only benefit, their economic and political interest would be best served by the increasing of their cooperation internally, and by utilizing to a greater degree the westward gateway which Azerbaijan and Georgia present. And I think the cooperation between Central Asia and Western Caspian countries like Azerbaijan and Georgia to that end is something that we should all work from now on.
All right, very fine. I appreciate that comment. Others, you're with anything?
If there's nobody else, can I just comment on something?
Absolutely, you please go forward.
I wanted to do in the beginning, it is not really about the substance of our discussions. I just wanted to comment on the background that Dr. Todd uses today. It really resembles to the scarf that is prepared in Azerbaijan and called kalagayı. I don't know if that's the particular thing that you're using. They are prepared of the natural silk and the colors, and they're very delicate pieces of art. So it's really very emblematic that you're using it, and actually related to the very crux of our discussions, and also testifies to the synergy and the delicate dance that the US has with the entire region. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for noticing that. And I will just say quickly, unfortunately, no, it is not from Azerbaijan. It is from Turkmenistan, the shrine at Paro Bibi. But I think that illustrates the connectivity among the Caspian region, that you have so many similarities among the history, the culture, and just everything, and that legacy of the region. So thank you so much for noticing that.
Thank you. Please, next time you can bring it from Azerbaijan, we can send it for you. It's called kalagayı. Thank you.
That was a very fine exchange. I very much appreciate it. And in fact, if I would pick up my camera and move it around my room, you would see a great deal in my house too, also from Central Asia and South Caucasus. Anyone else have their final comment before I turn the floor back over to our director, Mr. Nifty? Yes, Mr. Kipiani?
I fully acknowledge what Professor Todd mentioned on various occasions, that the cooperation and the partnership is a two-way street. And that's the reality which we should recognize from each side. And I'm very happy that the United States and Georgia in this instance are doing their own share and their own portion of that, so that, walking along that two-way street. So thank you very much indeed for that support. And thank you to the Caspian Policy Center for this brilliant exchange of views and opinions. Thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. And did I see one more hand raised there? Yes, Iskander, please go ahead.
I fully agree with Professor Todd on the fact that Central Asian states should play more important role, an active role in internal cooperation. And it's not up to just US to provide to create engagement in the region. And I believe that we need, all 5 Central Asian countries need to level up their standards of providing services on healthcare, education, political reforms, and economic reforms. They should prolong. It should be much more dynamic in this respect. And that's why we can be a subject of international relations rather than be an object of international relations. I believe that we are entering in very challenging times. It will be a big test for us with the COVID-19 and the forthcoming economic recession, etc. So, but at the same time, I believe that if we're able to pass through this in a collective approach, in a collective mood, we're able to find a new mechanisms and platforms where we're able to cooperate and create some new projects, not only government to government levels, but also between the on the cultural level, on the SMEs, small and medium-sized business, between the different regions of our countries, and we can create some vision how to work together in these challenging times.
Okay, very good. I'm going to make one comment here. One thing that I learned in my diplomatic career is that there are relations between governments, people-to-people relations that are really fundamental. Let's sincerely hope that we once again our cultural and economic and educational exchanges can pick up and continue again. That's how you build stability for the future. I'm going to now turn the floor back to our director, Mr. Efkan Nifty, if you'd like.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Take any. There you go. Yes.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I'd like to thank all our speakers from the region, from Uzbekistan, from Kazakhstan, from Georgia, and from Azerbaijan. And this was our first discussion, virtual discussion with the think tanks from the region. And we very much hope to continue this discussion in a think tank format that we have. I also want to thank to our US representative here as well. And this Caspian Policy Center, so far, we have established multiple venues and platforms to discuss key issues of the Caspian region and US engagement in the region. We strongly believe in the idea that corridors, connectivity, and cooperation is the way forward for the region in terms of trade, transit, connectivity, and building more linkages within the region, and also striving for more US engagement in the region. Obviously, we had some technical issues as well. I apologize for that if that posed problems for our audience and the speakers. But we are very much looking forward to further engagement down the road. And please tune into our future events. We are planning to hold events on 2 new initiatives of the US in the region and also in globally on the Blue Dot Network and also Economic Prosperity Network. We are in close discussions with our US stakeholders and regional stakeholders. Obviously, once again, I'd like to thank Ms. Todd, Mr. Kipiani, Mr. Shafiev, Mr. Tulyakov, Ambassador Hogland, Mr. Badridze, Ms. Jafarova, and Mr. Akelbayev for tuning us today, and also our esteemed colleagues at Caspian Policy Center for working hard to put this panel together. And finally, I'd like to thank our audience in the region and also in the United States for joining us for this discussion. And again, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a good day.
Thank you.